know, I was thinking about it. I'm not familiar with no-kid zones in the United States. It kind of happens accidentally because senior citizens live in residential centers, and so they may be concentrated there, but I'm not familiar with no-kid zones. One thing I thought about when you ask the question is it's one error that I see when it comes to policy making, and I call it perceptual reductionism. So we look at something like no-kid zones, and we assume that it applies to everyone, that everyone sort of feels there should be no kids zones. So I'm wondering if there's an alternative, like today in one of the panels, we heard about child-friendly cities and cities that particularly welcome children. When I was in the elevator today in my hotel, there's a special button for kids. This is kids, you can come here and have fun on this floor. So I think it's important not to just focus on one area or one concept and assume it applies to everyone. In the studies that I read recently, 90% of Koreans who are aged about 15 to 44 prefer to have children. 90%. Yes, it's very promising. So I'm sure there are people that, as you're saying, think there should be no kid zones. But I think we need to be careful not to assume that that applies to everyone. Recognize that it applies to this population, but not everyone. And try to look at other places where there may be different views. The DINKS phenomenon, double income, no kids, right, is not a term that I used very often in the United States. It is used, but not very often. And I think it can be an example of what I talked about in my presentation about sometimes issues are viewed through an individual lens. And sometimes DINKS oppose policies that would support children, like child allowances or payments or family leave. And that could be, if they oppose these policies for children and families, that could be an example of looking at an issue through an individual lens. What does it do for me? What does it do for my agenda? What I was proposing instead was looking at things through a family impact lens. So I was encouraging people to look at the fertility issue through a family impact lens, which is a wider view that looks at the commitment of family members to each other and looks at the value that families bring to society. Families perform several functions that are important for the good of their members and for the benefit of society. So family functions include forming families, economically supporting their members, child rearing, caregiving, and supportive family relationships. And I think it's important to realize that society depends on families. You know, children don't grow up in isolation. They grow up in families. And society, business, needs productive workers. They need youth with hard skills and soft skills. And many of these skills for succeeding in school are learned in families and learned in preschool programs early in life. And in studies, we know that children who grow up to be leaders and who grow up to be socially competent in problem-solving situations had parents and they were very securely attached to. And this is the bonding that infants have to their caregivers who are very responsive and available to them. So I think it's important to think about what families do for the good of workers and for the good of our society, and to look at it through a broader lens. I think the sharing of roles in the United States is changing, with fathers much more involved in child rearing than they've been in the past. And in my looking and studying about Korea, I found that men's attitudes are changing about wanting to be involved with family and with child care. But there are some barriers. And fathers say in Korea that one of the barriers is long work hours. And they're afraid if they cut back on their work hours, it will make more work for their coworkers, and the company may not think that they are loyal to the company. I think it helps for fathers to be involved right away. And it's a little hard sometimes if mom is on leave or on part-time work for father to just allow mother to do the work, because she may seem she's better at it. But the more fathers get involved and early on, the easier for them it is to continue. And you know, babies are kind of addictive once you interact with them and they respond to you. You experience the joy of having children and the joy of having a child who really looks to you and depends on you. So I think in Korea too, when you look at the long work hours, again, we can look at it through an individual lens. If companies provide reduced work hours, coworkers could look at it, oh, this is a benefit to the individual worker. But looking at it through a family lens, this is a benefit to a family who's performing very critically important work in Korea right now to raise the birth rate, you know, or if an opportunity is provided to a mother after she takes a break to make sure she has career opportunities. In an individual lens, you look at this as this is a benefit to the mother, to a woman, but looked at through a family lens, it's a benefit to the family who now more than ever is doing what Korea needs, which is bearing and rearing children. I think it's two-pronged. It's looking at the policies that allow them to take leave, first of all. And in Korea, the leave is longer and less generous. And the studies show that to increase fertility, it would be better if the leave were shorter and more generous. Because in Korea, over the duration of the leave, you'd only receive 31% of your previous earnings. So that's not a lot. So it depends on the leave policy. But you're also saying, what about the work culture policy? And you know, employers are an important part of this, and I think you need a carrot and a stick. So Korea has already done some sticks, you know, where they monitor metrics like how many people are taking leave. Other important metrics might be, are people allowed to reduce their work hours, which would be helpful, or as you mentioned, monitoring whether when women return after a break, do they have career opportunities? Do they move into a comparable position? So you need these sticks, and some ministries are already doing some of this in affirmative action planning. They're sort of naming and shaming companies who don't follow these metrics. So I think there can be some carrots too. There's a movement, I'd say across the world, to do corporate social responsibility, where companies who provide a benefit to society, it actually benefits their bottom line. It benefits their attractiveness to employees. It benefits their reputation. So I'm wondering, there's some of this happening in Korea already. They've been recognizing family-friendly corporations since 2008. But only about 5,000 corporations have received the certificate, and about 20% of them are public. So I'm wondering if that program could be expanded, and if we could think of other ways to publicly recognize companies who are family-friendly. Like maybe it's giving them more points in the public procurement services, applications for public procurement services. Or I was thinking about, could we have leaders in government, in education, in media, in pop culture really emphasize and promote businesses that are doing an exemplary job of supporting families. And I thought about, I wonder if we could recruit the 2 stars in that great show, Crash Landing on You. Could we recruit them to reward businesses who are doing a good job in family-friendly support? So can we just expand what's happening and really make it more publicly visible how important this is? and reward companies when they do it. I'm not familiar with other countries, but I think this kind of organization could be very helpful, but it would need authority for budget, authority for resources. It would need teeth because raising the birth rate is a complex problem, and in all of the reports I've read, the one similar conclusion is we need a comprehensive response. So a control tower in a country could be very, very helpful to make sure that government policies are passed, but government alone is not enough. You have to make sure government policies are implemented well, have to be monitored. We need education policies that take a look at how we're going to bring along everyone, even those who are struggling, the youth who are struggling now to get a job. Do we need some changes in the education system where maybe a college education doesn't work for everyone? And I know this is hard in a Confucian society who emphasizes white-collar jobs over blue-collar jobs. But we may need some changes in the education sector. The workplace policies that we talked about, but they need to be promoted, monitored. So I think there could be a valuable role for a control agency to monitor all these moving parts that it's going to take to really make change in fertility. But they're going to need teeth, resources, right? They're going to need clout to do it well, but it could be very valuable. You know, I think it's important to look at surveys of Korean citizens about why they don't have children. And a third of them say it's housing costs. Another third say it's education and childcare expenses. So I think if you're going to get serious about increasing the birth rate, we need to listen to what prospective parents are telling us, and they're saying they need more income support. Sweden is kind of a leader in this area, and they provide child allowances, family leave benefits, subsidies for housing for families with children, childcare, which Korea already provides. Yes, I think if we're serious about it, we're going to need to look at how to make it affordable for parents to have children. I think politicians are making this a priority. And once they make it a priority, I have confidence that they'll act on it and see the importance of perhaps providing more money for this. In housing in particular, Korea is much below the average of most advanced nations. So once people make this a priority, I think the resources will follow. I argued in my speech today that it's possible for Korea to improve its birth rate. And, you know, is that wishful thinking? Am I just an optimistic person? I like to think that I choose optimism with both eyes open to the gravity of the challenge that we have here in Korea. You know, Korea has risen from the ashes of war to the 13th largest economy in the world. Korea has the most highly educated men and women in the world. Korea has established a generous child allowance system. And they developed in a very short time a remarkable system of early childhood care and education and after-school care. South Korea was recognized as one of the 3 top nations in the world for its response to COVID-19 pandemic. And Korean policymakers, I think, are recognizing the problem. And I work with policymakers a lot. That is the first step. You need to recognize there's a problem. And they started family policies about in the 2000s. And since that time, spending has increased 10 times. So I'm optimistic that Korea can increase its birth rate. And that's based on, my view of the future is based on the reality of what's happened in the past. Korea has made tremendous advances on many social and economic issues. And I'm proposing that past performance is the best predictor of future performance. It won't be easy, right? It'll be hard. No, But Korea's done hard things before, and I think they will do this again. And I think Korea could become a world leader in how advanced nations can increase their birth rate.